Hello everybody. Today's chapter is entitled Light in Our Darkness. So far, the picture is black indeed. We've been shown ourselves as we are, self-willed, murderous, diabolical. Having made God's fair world foul, has man any right to exist? The Bible has no hesitation in saying no, and it pictures the Almighty as being sick at heart as he contemplates the human scene. Gibbon's verdict still stands that history is indeed little more than the register of the crimes, follies and misfortunes of mankind. This is the human situation. And the Bible insists that we treat our predicament with all seriousness. It leaves us no room for shallow optimism, but makes us see ourselves as we are. For it's only when we do so that we recognise that if justice were done, God would have written us off long ago as an experiment that had failed. But the whole message of the Bible is that this is just what he has not done, because he loves us. And right from the beginning we are told that although God hates sin, he cares for sinners. In the Adam and Eve story, despite the fact that they had flouted the authority of God and rebelled against his command, he made for Adam and for his wife coats of skins and clothed them. This is the Bible's rather picturesque way of saying that God is still concerned about us through all our failures. Then in the story of Cain, the murderer, the compassion of God is stressed again. Banished from society and facing certain death, Cain is marked with God's protective sign. It's not a brand of shame, but rather a token of God's readiness to forgive even murderers. There's also great significance in the birth of a third son to Adam and Eve. The Bible is so full of symbolism in these early chapters of Genesis that a small point like this might easily escape us. But once we realise that we're dealing not with historical events, but with imaginative pointers to the truth about God and ourselves, we begin to look more closely to find out what those old writers are trying to say to us. What then is the point of the third son? Adam, as we've seen, is every man, made in the image of God but rebellious against his creator. Cain, the first son of every man, develops the worst side of his father's character, and rebelliousness ends in murder. Abel, the second son, is the type of the innocent victims of man's inhumanity, who have suffered down the ages at the hands of their brothers. Seth, the third son, takes the place of Abel and acts as a counterpoise to Cain. We're told that he was made in the image of Adam, who was made in the image of God, and that it was in the day of Seth's son that men began to worship the Lord. Is all this just ancient Jewish folklore? Or is the Bible saying to us something very profound? Surely we're being told, you are all Adam, made in the likeness of God, with a spark of the divine in you, but also earthy, rebellious and self-willed. You are also all Cain, with the blood of your brothers on your hands and violence in your hearts. But you are also all Seth, who after the murder of Abel offers mankind the possibility of a fresh start in a new direction, an opposite direction to that of Cain, not towards hate and brutality, but towards worship and obedience to God. In a sense then, Seth is the foundation member of a new kind of community within the world. This is an idea which we shall shortly see more fully developed, the creation of a people of God, who in a world dominated by the spirit of Cain, stand for something different. It is as if the Bible is saying that right from the beginning of history, there have been two ways open to man, the way of life and the way of death. Adam has both elements in him. His eldest son Cain chooses the way of death. His youngest son Seth chooses the way of life. This choice has always been open to people, long before the days of the Old Testament faith, to say nothing of Christianity. Primitive man was not without his moral standards, and pagans had their own virtues. It is to this that the Bible next draws our attention. In the story of Noah's Ark. Noah stands in the line of Seth. Although he is neither a Jew or a Christian, he sets his face against all that is represented by the descendants of Cain. We may think of him as an enlightened pagan, or as a devout and worthy man who follows the light of his conscience. In bringing him into the picture, the Bible is saying that God has never left himself without a witness, and that even in the dim beginnings of civilization, men have always had some kind of knowledge of God, and some sense of the difference between right and wrong. The story of the Ark is a splendid fantasy. It's the biblical version of a Mesopotamian folk tale. The only historical element in the narrative is the fact that there was a severe inundation at the top of the Persian Gulf, probably about 4000 BC, which wiped out the city-states that laid there. Traces of it were found by Sir Leonard Woolley while he was engaged in archaeological work in the area in 1929. Racial memory of the disaster and imaginative embellishments on it have produced the dramatic story as we now know it. The details are unimportant. The Bible is simply using this folk tale to teach theology. The flood stands for the judgment of God on a world that turns its back on him. In the 20th century as much as any other century. This is what we deserve. And but for the goodness of God, says the Bible, this is what we would get. But for the sake of the small minority represented by Noah, who live up to the best standards that they know, the life of the world is allowed to continue. For the sake of even one good man, the human race is given another chance. But this kind of natural goodness is not enough. The kind of society that is based on Noah's policy of doing no harm to anybody is not the kind of world that God intended. It's too shaky a foundation on which to build. God means man to live in harmony with his neighbour because he regards him as his brother, not because he's afraid of what will happen to him if he does him an injury. The world of Noah is one under the rule of law. It's dominated by fear. That's a world of second bests. In the story of the Tower of Babel, the Bible suggests that the world of Noah is little different from the world of Cain. It pictures civilization advancing, learning new techniques, establishing cities. Yet once again the twist in human nature wrecks man's progress. He wants to be God. Or as the Bible puts it, to build a tower whose top would reach up to heaven. It's the old root sin of rebellion and defiance, not glory to God in the highest, but glory to man in the highest. For man would be the master of all things. Man, he says, not God, is supreme. The end of the story is, of course, disaster for man's enterprise, confusion, disharmony, and misunderstanding. It's at this point that the Bible takes a new turn.